Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3.
Minute to go, folks. 1 minute to lift off. Oh, it's T-minus 1:30. Are we ready? Are we live? We caught that. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Emergency Community Services Committee. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please switch all electronic devices to a non-audible function during the meeting. I do note that we now have quorum. Madam Clerk, are there any changes to the agenda?
Yes, sir. We have, under delegation requests, two delegations for a future meeting. The first being 6.1, Graham Cubitt, Hamilton is Home, respecting the continued commitment for partnering with the City of Hamilton on affordable housing options. We have 6.2, Jeff Nevin, Indwell Community Homes, respecting the positive impacts of supportive housing. Under item 13, general information, the items have been withdrawn, the amendments to the outstanding business list. There was some discussion as to referring them to another standing committee's OBL, but the items will now be continuing to come back to Emergency and Community Services.
Thank you very much, Clerk. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Jackson. Any questions on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll call the vote. Councillor Jackson is a thumbs up. Councillor Maureen Wilson is a thumbs up. My hand doesn't know what it's doing. And that vote carried 6-0. We're now moving on to declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest today? Seeing none, if you do realize that you have a declaration during the meeting, just bring it to our attention right away and we can assist. Approval of the minutes for the previous meeting, June 15th, 2023. May I please have a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of the previous meeting? Moved by Councillor Cratch. Councillor Alex Wilson. Any issues with the minutes? Seeing none, let's call that vote, please. And that vote carried 6-0. We're moving on to delegation requests. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the delegations as presented? They are both for a future meeting of the committee. One of them is Graham Cubitt, Hamilton is Home, respecting continued commitment for partnering with the City of Hamilton on affordable housing options. And the second one is Jeff Nevin, Indwell Community Homes, respecting the positive impacts of supporting housing. Both of them are for a future meeting. Moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Maureen Wilson. And we'll call that vote, please. Thank you. And that vote carried 6-0. Thank you. We are now moving on to consent items. We have 3 sets of advisory committee minutes before us. 9.1A is the Seniors Advisory Committee for May 5th, 2023. 9.1B is the Hamilton Veterans Committee minutes, April 25th, 2023. And C is the Hamilton Veterans Committee minutes for May 30th, 2023. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. Is there any discussion on the consent items? Seeing none, I'll call the vote, please.
I vote yes. I have used absolutely on the next.
And that vote carried 6-0. We now have an information report. The Youth Strategy Annual Update, CES 15056E citywide. May I have a mover and a seconder to put the report on the floor? Moved by Councillor Alex Wilson, seconded by Councillor Nan. Jessica Chase, Director of Children's and Community Services Division, is here in case there are any questions. Absolutely. May we have an overview of this report?
Absolutely. Through the chair, Jessica Chase, Director of Children's and Community Services. So this report is providing an annual progress update on the work around our youth strategy. So last year, Council endorsed the city's first ever youth strategy, which lays out the priorities based on the feedback that we have heard from youth in our community. And so the report provides an overview of the accomplishments of the last year and some of our next steps. A couple things that I would just highlight. One is that we continue to build and strengthen our youth steering committee. One of the things that's absolutely integral to this work is that we have the voices of youth that are leading and guiding the work throughout the process. So we continue to work closely with the Youth Steering Committee on all of the implementation aspects of this strategy. The other thing I'll just highlight is that we recently held the first Youth Summit, which was a great success. And we had a number of youth from across our community come together at Mohawk College for a day of speakers, of learning and networking, and we've received really positive feedback from the youth. And again, the Youth Steering Committee really guided and hosted that event.
Councillor Jackson. That's fine. Thank you for that overview. Thank you. Any further questions of the director? Seeing none, we'll call the vote, please. Thank you, Director. And that vote carried 7-0. Thank you very much. We are now moving on into the agenda with regards to item 10.1, which is delegated authority for service manager decisions. May I please have a mover and a seconder to put the recommendations on the floor? Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Nan. Thank you. Michelle Baird, Director of Housing Services Division. Any questions for Michelle? I'm seeing none, so we'll call the... Councillor Alex Wilson.
Apologies, was just switching between tabs there.
That's okay.
I think under delegated authority, I'm just trying to understand when this situation would come up. If we could walk through an example about where maybe in the past couple of years this has come up and staff haven't had the delegated authority and how that was handled now, and then if a similar situation came up in the future and you had the delegated authority, how would that be handled differently?
Director Baird.
Through the chair. So I'm going to have Manager Krebs speak to the details. However, I wonder if it would just be helpful if we start with a bit of an overview of what the ask is that's before you and what all of this really means. And so the Housing Services Act requires the City of Hamilton as service manager to provide consent to certain requests from social housing projects. These are all the projects that were originally funded by the province. They include requests to take on debt, develop projects, transfer projects, for example. This report before you is requesting the authority to be delegated to the general manager for low-risk requests that do not involve taking on new debt or change to service levels at the facility. So overall, it's going to reduce the number of reports that are coming to committee for these low-risk items. There are a couple of reports that you're going to see before you in the next couple of months that would still, for example, if we're looking at a transfer of a property, that would still be coming here to committee for approval. If we're looking at borrowing, for example, for capital works, those kinds of things would still be here, but I think perhaps Brian can talk to some sort of low-risk things.
Manager Krebs, please.
Sure, through the chair. A good example is that we had a request from a housing provider for permission to fill in a swimming pool. It's part of the physical infrastructure, and so they felt that they needed to come to us for permission to alter the property. In that case, permission was granted by staff, but after subsequent discussion, the decision was that in future we needed to get clearer delegated authority, so that way we knew that this was a clear direction from council. In that case, there's low risk. It was ultimately a financial decision on the part of the provider. It didn't add or detract from the service manager's expenses.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Wilson.
Thank you. And then just seeing that the delegated authority is being given to the general manager, but we're also through our HSIR pursuing a housing secretariat, just wondering the balance of the system we're in right now and the system we're building, and if this is going to be the same place where those maybe authorities exist in the future, or just how some of the work we're doing in the housing portfolio more generally may relate to this?
Director Baird, please.
Through the chair. So for this specific item, it is specific to those social housing provider units, so it will go through delegated authority to the general manager. The work that's happening in the HSIR, you'll see a broader bucket come forward around delegated authority on tasks there, but this one wouldn't be part of that because it is specific to social housing providers.
Councillor.
Thanks. I appreciate the answers to those questions.
Thank you. Councillor Wang, please. Asked and answered. Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll have the vote now. And that vote carried 7-0. We are now moving on to 10.2 in our agenda, which is the Rosedale Tennis Club, Inc. loan request. Kirk Weaver, Financial Planning, Administration and Policy, is here to answer any questions. Before we get to that, may I have a mover and a seconder to put the recommendation on the floor? Moved by Councillor Nan, seconded by Councillor Wang. Thank you. Any questions for Kirk? Councillor Nan, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, I don't have questions of staff. I just wanted to make a comment.
Please do.
Thank you, and really wanted to say thank you to staff for meeting with the Rosedale Tennis Club in coming together on a what looks like a really good, viable solution here. An interest-free loan. It enables the not-for-profit tennis club to expand and dome their requirements to make sure that it's an all-season facility, currently serving young folks and folks of every age demographic, both locally in the ward and across the city. We do have residents that come in from adjacent neighborhoods who benefit from and use this facility quite often, and really appreciative of the solution that's here. If I could, the last question I would have is there were guidelines that were established to be met for the criteria for granting this loan through you to staff. Everything is satisfied. Staff are clear about the terms of repayment and no concerns coming forward?
Mr. Weaver, please.
Through the chair, Kirk Weaver, Manager of Budgets and Fiscal Policy. Yes, the recommendations in the report meet the requirements of the external loan guidelines that have been approved by Council.
Excellent. And so for public consumption, that's a 15-year repayment and an interest-free loan. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions on this item? Seeing none, we'll call the vote, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Weaver. And that vote carried 7-0. We're now moving on to 14.1, which is closed session minutes for June 15th, 2023. May I have a mover and a seconder to approve the closed session minutes? Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Alex Wilson. And we'll have that vote. That vote carried 7-0. Before I move to adjournment, is there any new business from anyone around the table? Seeing none, I need a mover and a seconder for adjournment. Moved by Councillor Wang, seconded by Councillor Jackson. He's always happy to adjourn. And we'll have that vote, please. Thank you, councillors, for a very succinct meeting. I appreciate the homework that you did to make it so. That carried 7-0. Thank you, Jessica and Lorraine.